Mixed martial arts isn't all about punishing your rival to the point of defeat. Rooted into the majority of the styles and traditions which many of the UFC stars practice is the idea of an uncompromised respect between the two fighters going to war. Over the years, this concept of respect in UFC has sometimes gone missing in favor of juvenile smack talk or social media jibes. But there's still a few rare instances where two competitors have had no choice but to applaud/salute the warrior standing opposite them in the octagon. If you ever needed proof that there were some authentic human beings buried underneath all the arrogant showmanship, I'm Gareth from WhatCulture Combat, and here are the 10 finest moments of respect inside the octagon. Number 10. Nick Diaz consoles Anderson Silva, UFC 183. Nick Diaz isn't a guy exactly known for his respectful approach to all things MMA. That's why his reaction after losing to Anderson Silva at UFC 183 was deemed as being quite out of character for the Stockton native. With the decision victory being Silva's first since his return from a horrific leg break against Chris Weidman in a rematch for the UFC middleweight championship at UFC 168, the Brazilian was overcome with emotion and crumbled to the floor in a show of unfiltered relief. Clearly knowing just how much the win meant for a fighter who considered retirement after his devastating setback, Diaz wandered over to Silva and lifted the legend onto his feet. He embraced his rival and told him, "Don't cry," before Silva returned the favor and announced that he respected Diaz. You just love to see it, right? This moment would be slightly undone in the aftermath, with Silva failing a drug test, but the image of Diaz celebrating the temporary return to form of one of combat sport's true icons was a touching moment of authentic respect inside of the octagon. Number 9. Daniel Cormier thanks Alexander Gustafsson for making him a better fighter, UFC 192. Though many fans have grown to dislike the sickly sweet character that is Daniel Cormier, it is worth remembering that this isn't just a front he's putting up for effect. The former Olympian is actually quite a respectable dude. This could be down to his legacy as an Olympic caliber wrestler, or possibly the fact that he has tirelessly pushed himself to improve as a fighter, analyst and commentator over the years. Whatever the reason, title challenger Alexander Gustafsson clearly thought a lot of DC after succumbing to the then UFC light heavyweight champion at UFC 192, and showed his appreciation on the night. After the announcement of DC's split decision victory, Gustafsson lifted Cormier into the air and shared a few personal words with the champ. DC would return the favor and state that Gustafsson's challenge had made him a better man and fighter. This was a far cry from the kind of bad blood that we'd seen between DC and John Jones earlier in 2015. Also, this show of dignified respect helped reaffirm just how needless the often contrived rivalries inside of the octagon really were. Number 8. Georges St-Pierre embraces Michael Bisping, UFC 217. When the absolute titans that were Georges St-Pierre and Michael Bisping were finally scheduled to take each other on at UFC 217 for the middleweight title no less, fans were eagerly anticipating this fantasy clash come to life, and I was one of those fans. They didn't disappoint, and the pair went to absolute war for 3 rounds before GSP submitted the champ with a rear naked choke. Rush successfully returned and won himself the middleweight belt for the first time in his career. However, in a display of unrivaled class, GSP chose to comfort the fallen legend instead of immediately reveling in his epic victory. In his post-fight interview, GSP went as far as to label Bisping as the toughest guy he'd fought, and confessed to always being a fan of the Brit. If you're gonna lose your title to anyone, you'd be hard-pressed to find a more gracious usurper than Georges St-Pierre. Good having you, George. Number 7. Khabib Nurmagomedov vows to donate to Dustin Poirier's charity, UFC 242. Coming out of a feud as vile as the one that he had with the notorious Conor McGregor, many fans may have forgotten just how class and act Khabib Nurmagomedov had the potential to be. That same man who jumped the cage at UFC 229 also journeyed to Nigeria in 2018 with the goal of repairing water wells and building new medical centers. Seems like a nice guy. So it shouldn't come as much of a surprise to hear that he quite openly chose to help one of his fellow fighters raise some money for charity. Dustin Poirier had just lost his unification bout against Nurmagomedov for the lightweight championship at UFC 242, when he decided to swap shirts with the now undisputed champ. Nurmagomedov then declared that he would be auctioning off the shirts, with Dana White matching the eventual $100,000 that it was sold for. That money would be donated to Poirier's charity, the Good Fight Foundation, and Nurmagomedov's incredible gesture proved to be one of the finest moments of respect ever to take place in the octagon. Number 6. Lyoto Machida refuses to punish his friend Mark Munoz any further, UFC Fight Night 30. Fighting can be a truly cruel sport, and when two friends are forced to come to blows, the animosity involved in a bout has the potential to permanently fracture their relationship. Well, thankfully that wasn't quite the case when Lyoto Machida met Munoz at UFC Fight Night 30, and instead a rather shocking show of respect took place. With the fight being over in just 3 minutes, the two teammates didn't have to clash for too long at the event, and Machida's devastating head kick would be enough to take Munoz out of the game. Yet, whereas many other fighters would have pummeled their opponent until the ref dragged them off the lifeless entity, Machida delivered the fatal blow and then refused to follow up with more punishment. He held his hands up and accepted his victory with humility, but not before bowing to his pal and embracing him in his prone state. Now you're crying, shut up. Number 5, Nate Diaz and Conor McGregor salute their battles, UFC 196 and UFC 202. Make no bones about it, Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz did not like each other in the lead up to either of their box office clashes, providing volatile put-downs and explosive exchanges in pretty much every interview they were involved in. Any glimmer of respect between these two dogs looked to have been completely forgotten about. That wasn't until McGregor found himself being choked out by the Stockton star at UFC 196 and had to cope with the unfamiliar position of being the loser on the night. Diaz saluted McGregor for taking the fight on short notice, and the notorious one graciously applauded the victor for his performance. Then, just when you thought they'd buried the hatchet, that all became ancient history as soon as the duo decided to run it back at UFC 202. After bottles were launched and even more stones were thrown, the pair completely destroyed each other again for 5 more rounds. McGregor won via majority decision, and the bitter rivals would embrace after the final bell. In another show of the underlying respect between the pair, Diaz then congratulated McGregor for a good job, after the Irishman had commented on him being a hell of a competitor. It just goes to show that all the nonsensical verbal sparring which sells you a fight of this caliber very quickly becomes meaningless when the two fighters go out and put it all on the line. Number 4, Darren Till is grateful for the opportunity, UFC 228. Darren Till felt like one of the hottest properties in the UFC welterweight division in 2018, so a title match surely beckoned at some point down the line. Well, Till didn't have to wait too long for his chance, and fresh off the back of defeating Wonderboy in front of his home crowd of Liverpool, he was rewarded with a shot at Tyrone Woodley's belt. Dallas, Texas would play host to the intriguing battle, and Till's early takedown defense even suggested the unlikely upset could potentially become a reality. Yet that dream was quickly extinguished in the second round when Woodley grounded the Scouser and tapped him out convincingly. Till would quickly take to his feet and embrace the dominant champ, thanking him for the great fight and opportunity. After such a demoralizing defeat and feeling as though his momentum had been completely halted, the Gorilla showed his true class in honoring the defending champ and saluting his tremendous achievement. Number 3, Kamaru Usman honors the fallen champion, UFC 235. Tyrone Woodley retained his title for nearly 3 whole years and had seen off the likes of Stephen Thompson, Darren Till, and Demian Maia during his reign as welterweight champion. Staking a serious claim as one of the best ever to compete in the weight class, Woodley felt confident coming into his UFC 235 bout with Kamaru Usman. Yet it soon became apparent that he'd met his match in the Nigerian American. After Usman had his hand raised for the unanimous decision victory, the emotional star hugged the fallen champion. Mobbed by his entire family, Usman then quickly drew attention to the achievements of the former champ and suggested that he had to be in the conversation of best welterweights of all time. However, he still found time to praise and respect a fighter who'd forged an unforgettable legacy in the Octagon. That, my friends, is class. Number 2, Holly Holm refuses to boast in front of the fallen baddest woman, UFC 193. When Holly Holm shocked the world and knocked out Ronda Rousey with a deliciously timed head kick in the second round of their now iconic bantamweight title fight at UFC 193, quite a celebration was to be expected. However, Holm didn't immediately rub the upset victory in the fallen legend's face. Instead, she circled the ring to the sound of a stunned Marvel Stadium and hugged her team. Then, crouching next to the baddest woman on the planet as she was assessed following the vicious knockout, Holm waited patiently for the moment she could embrace a woman who paved the way for her own success in the company. After she'd finally had her arm raised for the win, Holm hugged Rousey and the torch was respectfully passed on to the second ever women's UFC UFC bantamweight champion. Number 1, Israel Adesanya bows to the master, UFC 234. Returning to fight for the first time since he was suspended for a year, Anderson Silva was coming off the back of a run of just 1 victory in his last 6 fights. Newcomer Israel Adesanya was lined up as Silva's return opponent at UFC 234. The last stylebender had been drawing numerous comparisons to the Spider throughout his fledgling UFC tenure, and fans were eager to see the two come to blows. Adesanya would eventually claim another impressive victory to add to his burgeoning collection. However, instead of relishing in the moment, he turned and praised the beaten icon of MMA. The two superstars then fell to their knees and bowed to one another. Adesanya likened the moment to a basketball-loving kid playing against Michael Jordan, and the respect between the two enigmatic stars of separate generations on the night was almost tangible. And you know what? That's what it's all about at the end of the day. And that's our list. Know of any other fine moments of respect that went down inside of the Octagon? Let us know all about them in that comment section right down there. Also, why not head on over to WhatCulture.com and click on some more awesome articles just like this one. I've been Gareth from WhatCulture Combat. Do not forget to like, share, click on that subscribe button and ring the bell for all things WhatCulture Combat. I hope you have the most incredible day that you definitely deserve, and I'm sure I'll see you very soon.